Hello and welcome to Expert Insights, powered by Parker Hannifin, the global leader in motion and control technologies. My name is Mark Jeffries, and today we're looking at the future of electrification across all aspects of industry. We're going to find out what that means, how we can embrace the potential of clean technology and explore the opportunities that the latest developments are allowing all of us to harness. And I'm delighted to welcome two Parker experts in all things electrification. We have Chief Technology and Innovation Officer Mark Chaya and the Vice President of Business Development, Paul Horvat. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Before we get into the questions, I always like to know a little bit more about every guest that I have. So tell me a little bit more about you, what it is you do, maybe a couple of your interests. And Mark, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, so I'm Mark Chaya. I spent the first 30 plus years of my career at Parker working in aerospace, bringing to life programs such as the 787, the A350, most recently the Airbus A220, where we did the flight controls, the fuel, the hydraulic system, and on programs like the F-35. And so I've been in engineering my entire career. I came to Cleveland and started working with our motion systems group about a year and a half, 2 years ago, before coming into my new role as the Chief Technology Officer for the company.
It's fantastic. And I have to say, the A350, very nice aircraft. So good job, if I may. And Paul.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Horvat, VP of Business Development for Parker, Motion Systems Group. And I've spent 30 years at Parker, focused on solving motion control applications, starting in the electromechanical world, and then in the pneumatic motion control world, and then most recently learning the hydraulic space. And I've had an interesting vantage point of watching some of these technologies converge together with the electrification of motion control and motion control becoming more connected as we move forward.
It really is a fascinating time. I can't wait to start the conversation. So let's get into it. There is obviously a lot of talk these days about clean technology. And I'd love just to get your perspectives. What do you think are the key things that people need to be aware of right now? So real trends versus hype, for example. And Mark, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Well, yeah, there certainly is a lot of discussion these days about clean tech, decarbonization. Electrification comes into that discussion. You know, is it real? Is it hype? Well, I believe it's real. I believe it's here to stay, driven by climate change. I think the conversation has shifted. There are government actions, policies being taken. Our customers are responding by moving towards renewables, deploying that energy in electrified solutions. And so it's an exciting time. All of that's enabled by technology, where it's really fun to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Mark, that there's really a convergence of three big things that are happening right now. You know, in the marketplace, if you look around and you see the adoption of electric vehicles in terms of passenger cars, I think McKinsey is saying that we're going to be at 6 million units of electric vehicles in 2021. So there's a lot of market pool, not just on the commercial side, but also on the consumer side, but also on the commercial side. If you look at fleets and the electrification of fleets that are happening, and a lot of big companies like Amazon and Pepsi that are making pledges about more green fleets. Then, of course, you have the government factor with somewhat of a carrot and a stick policy that's also driving adoption. On the one hand, incentives that you see out there coming from governments to encourage the purchase of electric vehicles. But also we even see the state of California as a leader in this area, where they have a hybrid vehicle incentive program that offers incentives to fleet owners. So there's a lot of market pull. There's a carrot and a stick happening from the government. And as Mark mentioned, the technology side, especially batteries, is changing so fast that it's creating a lot of opportunities and opening a lot of adoption that maybe we wouldn't have seen if these three things didn't all happen at once.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And just as a follow-on, Mark, hearing Paul talk about how consumers have adopted this technology, got enthusiastic about it, whether it's a Tesla or another type of electric vehicle. And in the end, we often separate consumers from business, but we're all one and the same. And so once that's happened, it really does open the floodgates, right?
Yes, it does. And that's where I think a lot of this really has hit the mainstream. That's why it's not hype anymore. I think that, when it comes to electric vehicles, when it was golf carts, when it was forklifts, that was happening, but I don't think it really caught everyone's imagination. Like today, the automotive market, with Teslas, with all of the electric cars, people see it. It's real. The adoption is increasing. And when it started, some of the initial cars, some of the hybrids, they were a little bit awkward, but they got the job done. Today these cars are beautiful. They're cool. And so electrification has really hit the mainstream because these things are cool.
And people love the performance.
They love the performance.
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, I have a Tesla. Full disclosure here, and and you pull away from the green light and everyone's left behind you. It's ridiculous. It's very addictive, I have to say.
That's right.
There's also a domino effect that happens from electrification. So what happens when everyone plugs in all these new electric vehicles into the grid? So there's a real need for additional capacity on the grids around the world, and that capacity needs to come from greener sources, from renewable energy. Another domino effect that expands the conversation is what happens with infrastructure. And so we need infrastructure, we need renewable energy to kind of keep up with some of the adoption trends that we see happening both in on-road passenger car, but also now with commercial trucks and even beyond commercial trucks into the future with off-road equipment.
Mark, you raise a very interesting point because you're right. We plug in our vehicles, we still need power. And of course, there's a push, as you just said, for finding power from green sources, whether, of course, it's wind or solar. But there is a feeling that we're not quite there yet. So this feels a bit like a race, doesn't it? We had stories in California this summer where people were told, well, can you try not to turn on the AC? Maybe don't charge up your car on this day because it's very, very hot. That's a very important element, right, of this journey towards electrification, Mark.
Absolutely. And I think you've characterized it correctly. It really is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. But I believe it is going to happen, and it is happening. We see it all around us. With electrification, the Tesla, the other cars using the battery technology, in the last 10 years, the cost of those batteries has come down 90%. And so, it's becoming more and more commercially viable. The battery technology is getting better. But even there, we still have limitations. We have limitations in the infrastructure. Even the batteries themselves don't have enough power density for all applications. And so battery technology needs to continue to develop. And we need to look potentially at other solutions, like potentially hydrogen is one of those options, to continue electrifying all of the applications that we'd like to see in the future.
What we see is that general trend from lighter vehicles adopting quicker to the heavier vehicles. And where I think fuel cells are really going to be important for the future is for those large, heavy vehicles that need a lot of energy storage. And that's one of the big challenges is it takes a lot of electricity to create clean hydrogen. And it takes us right back to that domino effect that we were just talking about, where the power grid and some of the advances that need to happen there, as well as infrastructure.
So, Mark, I was going to ask you really, how is electrification evolving? And I wanted to talk about battery, but you hit it really well there. But just to finish that thought on battery evolution, I feel like it's not necessarily a missing piece, but it's a piece that just needs to be improved. Is there in the industry, is there a view on how long it might be until we get such battery innovation that this is no longer a conversation? We know we have it. Is it 2 to 3 years? Is it 10 to 15?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And there is a lot of discussion in the industry about the evolution of battery technology. It has continued to get better and better. It's not quite Moore's Law type better like we've seen in the electronics industry, but both the cost and the performance of batteries has continued to improve. There's a lot of work being done on next generation battery technology, solid state batteries, which would prove to be even more efficient and have even more storage capacity. And so I expect to see a continued evolution of battery technology, where batteries are continuing to get better. And I think in parallel, there'll be other technologies explored as well to continue to develop the capability we need for the larger vehicles, as Paul has said.
And Tesla has really distinguished themselves as a leader in battery technology. And if you look at what some of the industry experts are saying, they're projecting that based on the huge investments that Tesla is making in batteries and getting cost out of the batteries and improving the performance of the batteries, that that the price of batteries, which are now somewhere in the range of $140 per kilowatt hour, they're probably going to be down below 50, which people would have thought was impossible. And then probably some of those next generation battery technologies, Mark, that you're talking about. Those are breakthrough technologies that would dramatically improve how quickly the batteries charge. They're very light in comparison to how much energy they can store. But that technology is probably still not going to be, starting production until the end of this decade.
Right.
So in the meantime, we have a lot of great innovation happening by some of the leading battery manufacturers, especially Tesla, in the area of getting cost out and getting performance better and better, but really focusing on scale and cost. That's a huge, huge driver for adoption.
Yeah. Right. That's fascinating. I actually read, and forgive me, I don't know the names, but there was a gentleman who was a very big part of Tesla. He left the organization, but obviously remained good friends with the company because he started a company to recycle the older batteries and get them back into the ecosystem again. And he's building smaller factories next to each of the big Tesla factories and keeping that, what do they call it, the circular economy going.
Circular
economy. So let me ask you now, where do we go with this? So Paul, I'll start with you on this one. What do we do with where we are right now? Where are organizations trying to differentiate? And how do you anticipate this perhaps changing over time?
Yeah, it's a great question because a lot of our customers who are the machine builders of these mobile pieces of equipment, on-road and off-road equipment, they're faced with some big challenges, right? But on the other hand, there's some huge opportunities because some of the changes are so fundamental in how you design the vehicle that they're dealing with a lot of newness, and so there's a lot of learning, a lot of new suppliers in some cases, and a lot of new challenges that arise, such as efficiency being key, and how do you keep things cool and get the heat out of them? How do you keep the noise levels low? All of these kind of side issues that end up, becoming big issues when you start changing how machines are designed. And so, those are some of the fundamental things that, people are looking at their business models of how their business model might require them to do something different with their own distribution channel, how they train their distributor networks. There's just very much of a domino effect, not just on adjacent market sectors like the power grid, but also for the OEMs who are building machines. There's also domino effects that are a result of how these machines are fundamentally architected.
Right. And on that question, if organizations, manufacturers are thinking about electrifying their machines, and obviously they feel the pressure, they see what is happening, from your perspective, what advice would you give? What are the key things that perhaps they need to consider?
Yeah, it's a great question. And because there's so many challenges and opportunities, I would say you want to be dealing with companies that have domain expertise. So, in the case of, we have, three types of technology at Parker. And, the two that we're talking about really here are hydraulics and electromechanical and how they come together. So, dealing with a company that has the capability and depth of experience solving applications in tough environments, such as mobile equipment, where the equipment takes a lot of abuse and it's operating in very extreme conditions. So just making sure that you're figuring out how to solve the application in the most efficient way and looking at things as a system.
Yeah, it's really a systems engineering challenge. And the internal combustion engine vehicles took years and years to develop, to really get to the point where they are. I would expect to see the same evolution with electric vehicles.
Yeah.
The systems thinking, though, of being able to draw multiple technologies, you've got the electric motor. What's driving the motor? Well, you need power electronics. Well, now you've got power electronics in a motor. How are you going to cool that? You need thermal management. And so working with suppliers, companies that have the multiple technologies that could be brought together is, I think, key. And I think that's a way for companies to differentiate themselves in this market space.
I think that's 100% right. And Paul, you mentioned the hydraulic side of the business. Do you think where we're going in electrification changes the outlook of the hydraulic business?
That's a great question. A lot of people ask me that question. Is this the end of hydraulics? And the short answer is, hydraulics are really good at what they do. And hydraulics for work functions are not going away anytime soon. So what we have are the convergence of two technologies working together, where you get the best of the hydraulics world, where you can take all of the shock loading and abuse that hydraulics are known for, and the power density that you could pack so much force into a very small space. That is critical when you're looking at operating in such extreme environments, and then supplementing the hydraulics with the electromechanical control, where now you have the ability, running off of batteries and an electric motor, to have a hydraulic system that's optimized for the electrified version of what it needs to do. It's all about getting the job done for the customer, whether it's some type of application that's been done for years. It's just going to be done differently now with a more electric and more connected version of hydraulics.
Yeah, maybe to springboard off of that, Paul. The hydraulics bring the durability, they bring the power density, they bring the safety, the reliability that many customers have come to know and enjoy in their applications. I mentioned in the intro, I'd worked in the aerospace world for the first part of my career. Aircraft have gone more electric. And what that means is you've got electricity powering a motor, powering a pump, but many of those same functions, that are moving the elevators, the ailerons, they're powered hydraulically because of all of those same reasons. And so we're seeing kind of the same movie now playing out, in the industrial place, in the space, and in the mobile space.
I mean, Mark, these are exciting times. The electrification market is obviously continuing to grow. This is an unstoppable train now. Is there anything else you would share about how that affects product development? You mentioned a few elements of partnering with the right groups and thinking ahead to how the future might look. Anything else you would add?
Well, it's moving so quickly, and that's what makes it so fun. And so, as a company, it's had an impact on how we look at how we're organizing our business. One of the things that we've done is we've looked at our businesses, our divisions, where we may have one making motors, we may have one making pumps, another making actuation, and they're each businesses running on their own that we need to bring together. And so what we've done is we've put together a motion technology center focused on electrification, where we've put subject matter experts. We have a building, we have a space, we have funding, where it's really a team focused in on bringing these technologies together to do that systems thinking and application that we spoke about earlier, not replacing what we do in the divisions, but really augmenting what we do in the divisions and enabling that speed to be able to have a place and people to work on these things and move quicker.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch the motion technology system, this organization that Mark is talking about, has got some of our best motion control experts from both our aerospace group and our motion systems group. And it's been fun watching them collaborate and learn from each other. And we're building a very strong foundation of technology that we'll be utilizing for quite some time in this new electrified world that we're entering.
Fabulous. We're almost out of time. And so I always like to end with a question that asks you to put on your futurist hats. So you're at the forefront of this business, of this incredible trend. But if you look ahead 5, maybe even 10 years, I know it's almost impossible. What type of electrification trends might we see? Maybe which ones would you love to see? I'll start with you, Mark.
Very good question. So here's the time to think about the future. So we've already talked about electrification, and it's really here. It's here now. And so I expect in the future we're going to see it continue, but at a much faster pace. We're going to see more adoption, and we're going to see it migrating into larger vehicles. Some of the vehicles that Paul talked about, the construction equipment, the farming equipment that have a duty cycle that today hasn't been addressed with batteries. I think we're going to see that in the future. With electrification, we're also going to now with it have more connectivity. And with connectivity, we'll not only know where our vehicles are, but how they're performing. And so with that information, we can have predictive health monitoring. And so I think all of it is going to dovetail together. And so we have electrified, connected, health monitored, maybe even autonomous vehicles in the future.
Nice. Paul?
Yeah, when I think about projecting into the future and what it looks like, I think, I see a lot more adoption across a lot more different weight classes and machine types. So we were talking a little earlier about, generally speaking, adoption happening from lighter vehicles to heavier vehicles. And in that time frame that you're talking about, I think there's going to be a lot more of the heavier vehicles benefiting from, hopefully, more renewable energy on the grid that enables the clean production of hydrogen. Because I think, that's really, that next step is all about how do you get clean hydrogen so that you can really have an effective fuel cell solution for these big, heavy machines of the future. That's what I see in the future. But I think batteries are just going to continue to be the short-term story where the performance keeps getting better and the cost keeps going down. And it just makes it easier and easier for these machines to be rethought of how we do them. And it's an exciting vision of the future, and I think it's real.
Without a doubt. I have to say, that was an absolutely fascinating conversation. We could have gone on for hours. Thank you so much for your insight, your ideas, and of course, all the experience you brought to that chat. Mark Chaya, Paul Horvath, thank you both very much indeed.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.